Hi everyone, welcome to EdTech with jReb. I'm Javier Robagliati and I'm here to share with you a bit about building rubrics with AI. Before we get started, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at jreb22 underscore, or if you want to connect with me via my website, you can go to jreb.me. You can sign up for a monthly free newsletter and see all past videos I've produced. Now, let's get on it. Um, I want to explore today three different tools, AI tools, that can help us to create a rubric. So why do we use rubrics? I think they are great for alignment with standards, and they're great also as a way to provide feedback for students. If the students are used to using rubrics, you would have to use less time by giving feedback through rubrics. So let's get on it. The first tool I want to explore is Magic School. You can sign up at magicschool.ai, and this is what you see when you log in. You have a lot of different options to choose from. And if you go to the top right and click on the search box, you can type rubric and you will see the rubric generator. So it's pretty specific. Magic School is characterized by having specific tools already built uh, with buttons like you just saw to help teachers do their work more easily. So here you have a couple of things to input. You have to select your grade level. I'm going to choose, as an example, 7th grade. The point scale, how many levels of proficiency you want to produce in your rubric. I'm going to choose 4. And then what is the standard or objective? I'm going to choose a standard that I did in my class recently. So we are going to look at students will be able to understand what the components of computational thinking are. So this is the objective or the standard of the assignment. And then we're going to put a description of the assignment. I'm going to copy and paste what I have over here. It's going to be an assignment where students create a poster explaining one specific component of computational thinking. And then they have to present to the class what they have investigated so that the class gets the information from all 4 components, and everyone as a group can understand what computational thinking as a whole and its components are. You can also dictate your objective here. You have the mic button. You can also attach an assignment description, which is very useful if you already have your assignments elsewhere. And you can also add additional customization for the rubric. For example, here we have an example that says, be sure to include supporting arguments as a category assessed. So you can give specific directions for the AI chatbot to create the rubric based on your instructions. For this example, I'm going to leave it a bit vague on purpose. So I'm going to click on generate, and we are going to get, in a second, this rubric. And we can see we have the 4 levels of proficiency. Excellent, proficient, needs improvement, unsatisfactory. We also have the 4 criteria that Magic School suggests we use. You have content understanding, collaboration, poster quality, and presentation skills. Collaboration, because in the description of the assignment, I included that the posters will be done in groups or in pairs because my class is small, so I can do that. I can do pair work, and it would work well. So Magic School has included collaboration, content, poster quality, and presentation skills. So these are all the criteria and the levels, and it's there. Now, instead of editing this version or trying to tailor it to what we specifically need, because as you can see here at the bottom, you can tell Magic School to modify what it has created by giving it extra instructions. Instead of doing this, I want to explore another tool that is going to help us. This is called Brisk. Brisk Teaching is an extension that you can add to your Google Chrome, and you can go to briskteaching.com and you'll be directed to installing the Chrome extension. So for that, I'm gonna go to a Google Doc document. You can see here I have the prompt already written down. And at the bottom right corner, you see this little icon. That is actually the Brisk button, the Brisk extensions button. And you will see this menu. You have many options for different tasks, but now what we're going to try out is creating a rubric. So I click on Create, and I'm going to click on Rubric. Now, I need to provide an instruction for the AI to work. I'm going to grab most of the text I have here, copy it, and paste it here. Also, as I know I'm doing this for a 7th grade class, I can select here 7th grade and 4-point scale for the proficiency levels. I could also select standards directly here, but I didn't do that in Magic School, so I don't want to do it here, so we can compare it later. So then I click Brisket, and it's going to load up. It's going to generate a table that contains a rubric. In this case, it's opening a new document, as you can see here, and it's going to start generating that rubric. It creates a new document because that first document that I had where I activated Brisk had text. So it thinks it might be a student's document, something that a student turned in. So instead of creating the rubric in the document that belongs to the student and risk modifying any work made by the student, it creates a new document on your Google Drive. As you see here, there it is. We have the rubric completed. You have the 4 levels of proficiency that I chose: excellent, good, fair, needs improvement. And we have the criteria that Brisk has suggested. We have understanding of the component that the students needed to research, example quality, poster design, presentation skills, and teamwork. This looks pretty similar. From the start, it already looks pretty similar to Magic School. So we're going to look at yet another tool, which is the AI chatbot that Google created called Gemini. You can access it through gemini.google.com, and you have this recognizable chatbot environment, and you can write your prompts here. So I'm going to copy the prompt I have ready, which is the same with you so far, and I'm going to paste it here, and I'm going to press enter so Gemini can start generating. So it starts with a couple of sentences notices, and you will see that the rubric that Gemini is generating has the proficiency levels as columns, sorry, as rows instead of columns. So I have it here on the first column. I have proficiency level exceeds expectations, meets expectations, approaching expectations, and below expectations. And it has the criteria on the other side. Now, I know that I can edit this rubric right here from the same environment of Gemini. So I'm gonna ask it to swap rows with columns. As you know, Google Gemini is a generic AI chatbot. It's not education. It's not an educational tool specifically. And it's telling me that it cannot swap rows with columns, which is weird because I've done it before and it should work. Let me try a more specific instruction. And there it is. But as you see, it hasn't done anything. So I'm going to modify the prompt a bit more. You have to be more specific with these types of chatbots because they're generic, right? They're not tailored for education. Swap rows with columns in the rubric so that the levels of proficiency are on the first row and the criteria, the assessment criteria are on the first column. The cells should be the appropriate descriptors. And let's hope this specific instruction makes Gemini understand what we need to have right now. There it is. Now that my prompt is a bit more specific, I see that my table now reads the same way that the other two that we've already generated. Exceeds expectation, meets, approaching, below, and then the criteria are row by row. Understanding of the content, poster design, presentation skills, and collaboration, right? If we check the first table, you'll see it's the same 4 columns that Gemini first generated and the same 4 levels of proficiency. So now, how do we choose which one to create, which one to use to create our rubrics? How do we get on with which one to use? Because they are similar, however, they do have certain differences. So let me show you this little table that I've created with my appreciation in terms of these 3 tools in a test I did earlier this week. Let me just modify the brisk one because I generated it today. It behaved differently, which is something that can happen with, right? So brisk actually created 5 criteria today. Magic School created 4, and Google Gemini created 4 in this case. You see, in my test, it had created 5. To decide if this rubric is useful for student feedback as it is, I say that the brisk one and the Magic School one are a bit better than the Google Gemini in terms of the language it used. So I believe that the evolution from one level of proficiency to the next is clear as to differentiate the different levels, both separate levels of proficiency. And the Magic School specifically, it's, I think, clear enough for students to understand. You can try it out and see how it looks on your end. The Brisk rubric is a bit more wordy, but it's still comprehensive and clear. However, Gemini's rubric, I think it's a bit unclear for students. It's going to be a bit more complicated for them to understand what you want to say if you're using the AI rubric as is. Then, in terms of selecting the criteria, because that's something else, right? Each tool has suggested a list of criteria that we should use to assess our students in this activity. I think that the Brisk ones seems appropriate. When I made my test, it seemed aligned to 21st wording of the criteria. Looked like, oh, I and it all collaboration in this. It was all teamwork, but I do appreciate rubric included this, because when I was creating this example, this experiment, I didn't really pay attention to the fact that I had pairs or trios of students working together. So collaboration could be something I wanted to assess. Also, you can evaluate which of these criteria you want to actually access. Maybe the AI suggests 5, but maybe only 3 of them are relevant to you. You can always choose and pick from that. In terms of the Magic School one, I think the criteria are appropriate and clear. As I'm saying, in this case, we have 4 categories, right? Content, collaboration, poster, and presentation. I think they're okay. Nothing extraordinary, either positively or negatively. In terms of the Google Gemini rubric, I think the criteria, they're appropriate, they're clear. There was in my previous experiment, there was this additional criterion that I didn't really like. It was explanation clarity, which could be seen kind of redundant. For me, it was a bit redundant. And then instead of having something about poster design or content or quality even, it said something about visual appeal, and the wording, I didn't like that, because I really, in my opinion, students shouldn't be looking too much at the appeal of things, but rather, why is something appealing? Maybe with principles of graphic design, I could make something visually appealing. So the rubric, in that sense, that wording, specific wording, I didn't like it. Then let's go to how can we edit this rubric if we want to in these tools. If you are using Brisk, you have to do it manually, because it's an extension that works on top of Google's apps. So since I was using it on Google Docs, there is really no way for me to edit the rubric through Brisk on Google Docs. I could, however, grab the table and edit the words myself, but that is not using Brisk. Magic School loads up the rubric in a AI chatbot environment. Let me show it here. So there is a way for you to edit the rubric if you were to include additional instructions here in the chat box. And finally, in Gemini, it happens the same, right? Since it's a generic AI chatbot, you can write another instruction here in the prompt box and try to modify your rubric. As it is a generic AI chatbot, you have to be very specific with the instructions you give to the tool. Then a couple of additional comments in terms of these 3 tools. The rubric I created was basically a checklist rubric that had 2 elements in the descriptors. And if we see the one we created right now, it kind of does for the first criterion and the second criterion also, the third one, and the last 2 also. Yeah, maybe the last one not so much, but the presentation skills, poster design, and content criteria, those have kind of like a checklist sense to it. You can see here there are 2 specific components to the criterion that evolve as we move through the levels of proficiency, which I really appreciate because I'm used to using a 7-grade scale, but a 4-level rubric. So whenever I have something in between 2 levels of proficiency in my rubric, I can find a grade that goes with that. So I appreciate a checklist rubric in that sense. And if we check that the criteria in this particular instance, the teamwork criterion doesn't work for the outcome of the assignment, which would be the poster and the presentation, but it's implied that the teacher would have to be looking at the process of the collaboration between the students, so this could be accurately graded, right? So it's more criterion is more about process rather than the learning outcome. In terms of the one that Magic School created for us, it also has some checklist characteristics. It's not so clear. And again, when you use these tools, you will usually never get the same result twice. As you can see, I'm already getting something different than when I did my test. So there are some checklist rubric characteristic here. Not so much as I would like. Maybe that would be an edit that I could ask Magic School to create. And I believe this is the one that has the clearest language, and it's very easy for students to understand what's being assessed for each criteria and what each level represents in each of the criteria. So I think this is not only a rubric that you can use for assessment, for grading, but it's also a rubric that you can use for feedback. So that's something I always appreciate, trying to save a bit more time here and there. And my additional comments on Google Gemini is that since it's not tailored to educators, the prompts need to be very precise. And as you saw when I did the swap of the rows and columns to fit the format I wanted, it does take a bit of adjusting to make the tool do what you exactly want it to do. And there's something else that in the wording of the prompt, you can always restrict the capabilities or like set the mood for Gemini to say, to ask something specific from it. Like, for example, my first sentence is, "You are an expert teacher." That focuses the tool onto a more specific area and assignment that I'm gonna ask from it. Also, something nice that I saw in Gemini, in the Gemini example, is that it included some some additional information. So it gives me a little title here, and it tells me the objective of the rubric, right? And look, visual appeal and presentation skills are also assessed. So it's not only focusing on content, but it also tells me there are external or accompanying criteria that have been selected too. And below the first table, there are suggestions. Suggestions for the teacher or the user that can make this either assignment or rubric better. For example, depth of understanding. Encourage students to go beyond basic definitions and provide real world examples. So if we go back to my prompt here, the assignment is students research and create a poster that explains one component and presents an example. So what Gemini has done here, it has read my prompt and it's telling me, hey, maybe be a bit more specific when you're asking your students to do your assignment. So you're asking for an example, but maybe make it a real world example. And you're asking them to explain a concept, but maybe go beyond basic definitions. Try to be a bit more deep in terms of the knowledge you're sharing. That's what Gemini is suggesting I do with my students, which I really appreciate because there are many little suggestions that it does, and you can always try to consider them and evaluate if you want to follow any of those suggestions. Which is also my last comment here. Tries to suggest next steps, because when you create the rubric, after all these little suggestions, at the end it asks you, would you like to add any specific criteria or details to this rubric? So Gemini itself, it's already from you to continue to work on this, to edit what it has created. It hasn't told you it's perfect and you need to use it like it is, right? So my conclusions for these three tools are as follows. For Brisk, this rubric, we're talking about rubric building specifically, right? It looks suitable for students who have practice with getting feedback through rubrics. Since the language is a bit more wordy than the Magic School option, I think it's okay if your students already have practice getting feedback through rubrics. For Magic School, I really liked it. Straight to the point, is suitable for students who are practicing or who are beginning getting feedback through rubrics. And for Google Gemini, I don't think it really created a great rubric because I felt it a bit disconnected from its purpose in terms of education. But I do like the suggestions at the end, the suggestions and the next step. So this is it for my exploration of these three tools in building rubrics with AI. As always, when using AI tools, you have to be mindful that you're not copying and pasting, because otherwise it's not original work, right? There's a rule of thumb going around that says you can use AI for like 80% of the work, but you need to add that 20% that is you, that is the human side of things, right? AI can help us save time, but in the end, we are the human educators that are trying to teach skills and concepts to our students. So this is it. Thank you for being here. And as usual, don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, or you can go to my website on jreb.me, where you can sign up for a free monthly newsletter and see all my past videos. Until next time, this is it. Thank you. Bye-bye.